Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 986, December the 14th, 2019, Saturday. Thank you so much for tuning in and good Saturday morning to you. A lot to cover today, just as we've had the last several days, so let's go ahead and get to it. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time on this because I did yesterday, but I just want to do a follow-up on something. I was talking yesterday about the segment in the Dan Bongino show where, he was talking about discovering these texts and this activity that was going on May 11th, which is the day that Alexander Down the Hatch Downer was having his meeting there with Papadopoulos in London over a couple of drinks, where Papadopoulos was alleged to have told Downer about the Russians having dirt on Hillary. Of course, Papadopoulos says he recalls the conversation pretty well with Downer, but he doesn't recall talking about Russians at all, or Hillary's emails, or anything like that. So, that's still an issue that's in dispute. But that's not the point here. That's just the background. But, so Bongino discovers these texts between Loose Lisa Page, Peter's Been Stroking Us, they're communicating with Andy McCabe, and they're mentioning Bill, which we assume is Bill Priestep, in these conversations on May the 11th. And they're talking about a tip. And they're all excited. This is the very day that Papadopoulos and Downer have had their meeting in London. So I think it's a very, very, as I said yesterday, I think it's a very good observation by Bongino. Now, he takes it one step farther and believes that this would eventually become the insurance policy. I'm not 100% on board with that. I think it's plausible, but I'm not there yet. But let's keep in mind, what happened was, as I'm thinking about this after talking about it yesterday, so I go back to my timeline, I'm looking at that again, I do a couple of Google searches, I go back and look at some of my notes, because I have a file where I keep notes for all my videos and for my timeline. And I looked in there and I discovered something that was a really hot topic back in 2018, in the summer of 2018, when we had discovered that Bill Priestep, Peter's Been Stroking Us' boss, the number one guy at counterintelligence at the FBI, was in London in the week that Papadopoulos and Downer had the meeting. And of course then Priestep and Peter's Been Stroking Us actually did go in the week of August, the first week of August, they actually did go and speak with Downer in London. So this is just another piece of the information that Bongino did not mention in his show that he probably should mention. He's probably forgotten about it. I'm sure he knows about it because we were all talking about it. It was a big deal when that came out, when we learned that Priestep had traveled to London on the 6th. Remember, it was on the 9th that Downer's assistant contacted Papadopoulos to have the meeting, and that meeting happened the very next day. So we know that there was two things that we are sure of regarding Priestep in London. We know that he went there on the 6th, and we know that he was still there on the 9th, because in his testimony in Congress, he discussed the fact that he was there on the 9th. Now, for whatever reason, this was kept very secretive, and the only reason that we really learned about it was because Peter's Been Stroking Us is having a text conversation with Loose Lisa Page, and he's talking about the fact that when Bill gets back from London, and he says, oh, well, Bill is going to be in London next week, and then that's what led to Congress asking him about that, and that's what led to us learning that he arrived there on the 6th of May, and that he was still there on the 9th, because he had, I can't remember exactly who it was that he was meeting with, and I don't know if we even learned exactly who he was meeting with, but he certainly was there. Bill Priestep was there. And then This would have been in May, on somewhere between May 6th and the 10th, probably, when Pre-Step was there, the very time that the whole setup was done with Papadopoulos and Downer. And then, of course, we then learn that on August the 5th, both Pre-Step and Peter's been stroking us go to London. We know this for a fact. They go to London, and, of course, they meet with an Australian official. And we can assume that's Downer. So it would have meant that very likely that Pre-Step certainly, it's certainly possible. We don't know this. We don't have this as a fact. We don't know as a fact Pre-Step met with Alexander Downer. But when you look at all the circumstances around his travel to London and what was going down in London, the conversations between Strzok, Page, and McCabe about a tip and all this other stuff, it all adds up and suggests that, in fact, Pre-Step had either met with Downer or someone of that capacity from an Australian official, maybe his assistant, but I would assume it would have been Downer himself. And we know for a fact that Peter's been stroking us and Pre-Step definitely met with, we assume, Downer as Australian official in London the first week of August 5th to be exact. So, just a follow-up point from yesterday's video and a follow-up for those of you who listened to Dan Bongino's show. You know what I'm talking about. And so this is just an additional piece of information that I didn't listen to his show today, so I don't know if he brought it up. But in case he didn't bring it up, keep this in mind. Pre-Step was in London during the week that Papadopoulos and Downer had their meeting. Now, we learned earlier yesterday that Twitch McConnell was on Fox News, and he said that as far as how the trial is going to be conducted in the Senate, if and when, and we can assume they will, impeach Trump, assuming they get the votes next week, assuming that occurs, and they get the votes in the whole House, then the trial will go to the Senate, and McConnell's asked how that's going to play itself out, and McConnell's like, hey, well, we're going to be working with Trump's legal team, the White House counsel, and they're going to be advising us. We're going to be basically doing handling this the way that Trump's legal team would like us to handle that. Now, we know that Twitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham have both come out and said, look, we just want to, as soon as it comes over the Senate, we want to have a vote. If we get 51 votes, boom, it's over. No witnesses, no trial, no hearings, nothing. Shut it down as soon as we get it, end it, throw it out, it's over. And as most of you know, I'm extremely opposed to that, as are many other people, because then the whole thing just sort of goes away and you don't get to actually prove, number one, that Trump's innocent, and you also don't get to drag all these people in and prove who's really guilty and prove what was really going on. You don't get to hear from the whistleblower, Sharamella. You do not get to hear from Chalupa. You do not get to hear from the Bidens. You do not get to hear from any of these people whose names have all come up, Lasko and all these people. So what we learned, though, from Twitch McConnell on Fox is that he'll be following the lead of the White House counsel. And what did we get this morning or yesterday morning in a story following Twitch's interview? We get a story in the Gateway Pundit describing how Trump and a couple people on his legal team, they don't want to kill this thing immediately. They want the hearings. They want to have Chalupa and the whistleblower and Schiff. They want all these people subpoenaed. Now, they may bump heads with Twitch and Lindsey Graham, and I know there's some sensitive areas about this, because when they start getting into Ukraine, that's when it makes people like Twitch and Lindsey Graham very, very nervous, especially Lindsey Graham, because they too had kind of a relationship with Poroshenko. Both McCain and Lindsey Graham went over to Ukraine, and Poroshenko gave them very high-level awards, and things and such. So I think Lindsey Graham, you can tell, he really doesn't want to pursue Ukraine. He does not. McConnell obviously knows that Lindsey Graham may have some issues here, that it may dredge up things about McCain, that it may dredge up things about other Republicans. For whatever reason, McCain and Twitch McConnell really don't want to pursue anything having to do with Ukraine. But if we take what McConnell's saying here, is that they're going to follow Trump's White House counsel lead, then the White House counsel and Trump himself, no, they want hearings. And again, the wise thing to do, the thing to do here would be to have these hearings and drag them out as long as possible. Call in all kinds of people. And because this is a huge scandal. In Russia, Ukraine is, you can bring up all the stuff that was going on with Ukraine in 2016 because we have this narrative, this myth that's out there. It's been pushed by the Democrats and the media that the whole Ukraine meddling in the election is all a hoax. It's none of it's true. You can't let that just lay there and not be dealt with. You have to confront that, and you have to prove, in fact, what we know to be true, which is that there was massive interference in the 2016 election from corrupt Ukrainian officials working with the Democrats, working with the FBI, working with Steele, working with the deep state, just like all the rest of the players. Ukraine was just another major player. Manafort was kicked out of the campaign because of the Black Ledger, which came from Chalupa and her Ukrainian contacts. You can't let this thing just lay there. You have got to expose it. You don't just want to exonerate Trump. You want to exonerate him, to the nth degree by pointing out, and you also want to correct the narrative. You cannot allow the Democrats and the left-wing media to continue to foster this narrative and then just and not answer it, not respond to it, not fight back. And so there's obviously a problem here. Trump and his team understand the unbelievable opportunity they have with this trial in the Senate to not only exonerate Trump, but to expose the extreme corruption that was occurring out of Ukraine and all the other things. Not to mention, you bring in the Bidens, you discuss Burisma, you discuss all these other people, and that ensnares many other high-powered Democrats, such as the rotten Reverend Clinton. Adam Schiff himself is caught up in this. Pelosi and her son are caught up in this. And again, the only problem here for Graham and McConnell is that in exposing all that, they also, possibly exposed themselves, or certainly not only McConnell, but certainly Graham and McCain. And so certainly Graham wants to cover his butt, but he also wants to protect his buddy McCain. So this is where the rub is going to be, and it will be interesting to see who wins that battle. I'm thinking it's probably going to have to be a compromise of some sort. And at some point, Lindsey Graham is probably just going to have to come out and tell the president and his counsel, look, here's the problem. Me and McCain were over there. We were talking with Poroshenko. We have some stuff. And if you pursue this, the Democrats are going to come back and throw this stuff up, and you're going to expose some other Republicans, not just me and McCain, but some other people. This thing could get real ugly. It could go places you don't want it to go, and the Democrats could start subpoenaing witnesses. And so it's definitely a lot of cover your ass. There's definitely a lot of tricky stuff going on here. But I really hope that Trump and his White House counsel win this fight. And if I'm Trump, I'll look at Lindsey Graham and say, well, man, did you do anything illegal? Well, if you didn't, maybe it's a little embarrassing for you, but you know what? We're trying to get out of the cover-up business and into the opening it up business. You can't have it both ways. And so, I think that this is the tricky, sticky wicket right here, and I do hope that Trump and his counsel end up coming out on the top on this one and force McConnell and Graham to actually have those hearings and to call in those witnesses to fully exonerate the president and expose the true criminals and the true crimes. There's a email. This was, I can't remember where I saw this. I think it may have been PJ Media. And we keep hearing this stuff about, well, there was nothing, going on in Ukraine. This is all a conspiracy theory. And we know all the stuff that was going on in Ukraine. Cheryl Atkinson did a major deep dive on it long before anyone else even thought about it. We've talked a lot about Chalupa, a lot about Ukraine, a lot about what's going on with the DNC, Isakov, and all the rest. But there's something else. And I don't know. I think it was PJ Media where I saw this story where they just kind of dropped this in there, which I'd forgotten about, but it's something that we learned a long, long time ago, and it just sort of has slipped our minds. But back on March the 19th of 2016, March the 19th of 2016, Google, the company Google, sent an email to John Podesta advising him that someone just used his password to try to sign in to his Google account. And Google actually provided Podesta with the IP address of the person who tried to access his Google account. And the origin of that IP address was Ukraine. Now, keep in mind, the Podesta brothers, particularly his brother Tony, had this lobbying firm, and they did a lot of lobbying, not just for Ukrainians, but also for Russians. And in fact, John and Tony Podesta were paid lobbyists for Russia's largest bank. And it's in the context of this email that this is what this was all about. Somehow it had something to do with this Russia's largest bank called, I think, Scher Bank, S-C-H-E-R Bank. This bank that the Podestas lobbied for, which is Russia's largest bank, and it had something to do with that, if this story is correct. But the bottom line being that Podesta was advised on March 19th, 2016 by Google that someone had attempted to log into his account, and it was a Ukrainian IP. Maybe they need to call Podesta in for a little conversation. And keep in mind, Hillary Clinton had some connection with this large Russian bank because they were one of the financiers of this program that the Reverend Clinton was working on to try to she was trying to, in promoting this idea of a Russian Silicon Valley. And this was in conjunction with some big donors who were also big investors with this Russian bank. So it gets real complex. But there's a Russia connection here, a Russian bank connection, Clinton connection, Podesta connection, and the whole nine yards. So just something to be aware of. Now, Paul Sperry wrote a very good article today. There's a lot of good things in it, or I should say yesterday. I don't have time to go through it all, but I want to go through a pretty important part of this story that he's written, and it also deals with Ukraine. So it also really targets Uncle Bob the Executioner Mueller and shows us that in the IG report, Inspector General Huckleberry Horowitz actually identifies Uncle Bob the Executioner and his team as conducting criminal activities in terms of knowingly falsifying information, knowingly withholding exculpatory information that Mueller was using, and what he was going after. His case would have been hugely blown out of the water if he revealed information that he had. So he did not reveal that information. And we learned that that was the primary focus of his investigation. So let me just go through a couple of paragraphs of what I'm talking about here from the Paul Sperry article. So we learn from the IG report that Uncle Bob the Executioner Mueller used Steele's accusation that Carter Page was involved in drafting the Ukrainian plank of Trump's campaign as part of his commitment that he had allegedly made to his Kremlin handlers. Now, none of this was true, and it was proven untrue. And Uncle Bob the Executioner, Mueller, knew it. The Inspector General's report reveals that, and it's in the report. It's in the report because Uncle Bob interviewed two officials who were in the know, who told him that no, Carter Page was not involved in any way, shape, or form in making Ukrainian policy or having anything to do with the Trump team's policies on Ukraine or Russia or anything else. He was an outside advisor, was not involved in any way, shape, or form in shaping or directing or having any input whatsoever into the platform or the plank for the Trump team on Russia and Ukraine. But Uncle Bob the executioner, despite being told this by two government officials who absolutely were in the know, Uncle Bob ignored this, and that is what allowed the fourth FISA on Carter Page to go forward. And it had been used in the three previous warrants as well. In fact, it's now obvious, according to Paul Sperry, that it was actually the key focus of Mueller's investigation. So what he's saying is that all the things that were in the dossier, Carter Page became the focus. So when Uncle Bob comes in and takes over the counterintelligence operation, turns it into a criminal investigation, he's handed all this information, all dossier-related material. The thing that he jumps on right away as being probably the best place to start digging is this allegation that Carter Page had worked some sort of a deal where he was going to be given this huge amount of shares or interest in a Russian energy company, would have amounted to like $3 billion or something, ridiculous amount. And that was in exchange for things that he was going to do to advance the cause for Russia. One of the primary things was that he was going to have an impact or influence Trump's policy on Ukraine and Russia. And so this is where Uncle Bob really dug in. And in the process of doing that, he found out about these two government officials that had information and had, documents from the investigation that had already been going on. So he interviews them, and they tell Uncle Bob's team, yeah, this stuff about Carter Page making promises and a deal to, influence Trump's policy on Ukraine and stuff. We've checked it out. We've looked at all the reports. We've looked at the emails. We've interviewed people. There's absolutely no truth to that whatsoever. Page had nothing to do with any of the policy guidelines or anything like that for Russia and Ukraine for the Trump presidency or Trump team or what have you. So Uncle Bob had this information, and he did not disclose that. That certainly would have killed the fourth Carter Page FISA. So to make sure that they didn't kill the Carter Page FISA so that they could continue to surveil him for another 90 days, Uncle Bob did not bring that to their attention. And the Inspector General, Huckleberry Horowitz, has discovered that in his report. So you can now put Uncle Bob the executioner and the Hillary donor posse on that list of people that John Durham is likely going to charge with crimes. No wonder they've been so quiet. Did you know that Stefan Halper, the fat man, was busted in 1994 for possession of crack cocaine, failure to comply with a traffic control device, and operating a vehicle with a suspended license? That's right, in 1994, Stefan Halper, the fat man, was busted for possession of crack cocaine, failure to comply with a traffic control device, and operating a vehicle with a suspended license, where he paid a $400 fine, and now the case has been sealed. And of course, I've already been through the Halper-Downer connection. As I said, I'm sure that Durham by now, or soon will, interview Halper. And I absolutely guarantee you he's going to ask Halper all about his relationship with Downer, which we know is a close one. We've got them pictured together several times. We know they've spoken at the same conferences. We know they both belong to the Cambridge crowd over there in the UK. All part of that. They're good buddies. Well, someone took a recent photograph of the rotten Reverend Clinton, and it's pretty obvious that she has gotten a Botox treatment, and it appears not to have gone very well because it's caused her cheeks to look like someone planted a couple of ping pong balls right here up in her face, and now she's got these two big bulging round things here I guess to make her look younger or something. But I don't know if you've seen the pic, but someone snapped a pic of it, and everyone's like, "Whoa, look at the rotten reverend. What's going on with those cheeks? Her cheeks are like blown up like they got ping pong balls in them." She's preparing for that run. She wants to look good. Yep. But I guess whoever gave her that Botox treatment, I don't know, they might want to redo that before she gets snapped in any more photos. It looks pretty bad. And then we have Burisma Joe Biden out there talking now, warning the Democrats that he's using what happened in the UK with that landslide election. He's using that as an example to say, see what happened when the Lib Dem party, when the liberals and the left wing and the UK went so far left. Look what happened. They got destroyed. They got wiped out. And that's exactly what's going to happen here if you elect a far left Democrat candidate for president. And for once, Burisma Joe has got it right. Absolutely 100% dead on. It's exactly what happened. It had a lot to do with Brexit. It had a lot to do, I mean, that was essentially the referendum. They want a new referendum on Brexit? Well, they got it. That's what that was. That was the referendum on Brexit that they wanted. It wasn't just a parliamentary election. And there's no doubt now that Brexit is definitely going to happen. I just hope it's the right kind of Brexit. But also have to credit Nigel Farage with coming up with a very, very good strategy of the way that he did that. He didn't put Brexit to challenge any conservatives. He only used Brexit people to challenge in places where the Lib Dems were weak, or people opposed to Brexit on the liberal or socialist side. And he focused on those blue collar type people. And even though they're not Brexit party people, they're not conservatives, they're actually liberals, they're actually socialist or whatever, but they're opposed to Brexit. And that strategy worked out. So, well done, Boris Johnson. Well done, Nigel Farage, even though I don't think they coordinated anything there too much. It just worked out just right. And so I think that, to me, I look at this as they're talking about having another referendum on Brexit. Well, there you go. There it is. There's absolutely no doubt, based on the results in the UK election, those people want Brexit, and they want it now. And I mean real Brexit. Very happy for my friends over across the pond today. Very, very thrilled. I'm sure Mike G is probably all smiles right now. And you should be. Okay, all through the Horowitz report, we keep seeing the number one person who's attributed with doing so many of the criminal, illegal things. They never give his name. He's only identified as case agent number 1 or SS special agent number 1. But they never disclose his name. Yet he's the one who was probably the number one offender. Now, so everyone's wondering, who is this agent number 1? Well, I don't think it's hard to figure out. A lot of people are pretty much saying this. I mean, it was the first guy that crossed my mind. We know it's not Kevin Kleinsmith, because he's identified already as lawyer number 1. So this is FBI agent, special agent, or what they refer to as Agent 1 or SS1. But he's responsible for the following things. He was Stefan Halper's handler and has been since 2011. He's the one who opened the case file, the electronic communication on Carter Page. He was the main driver for the FISA warrants on Page. He met with Steele's number 1 subsource and got all that information that proved that Steele's stuff was BS. But he never told the FISA court, never put it in the Woods file, never put it in any of the documents. He withheld all that exculpatory information. He interviewed Carter Page 5 times. He was in charge of every strand of evidence against Page. He was on the Crossfire Hurricane team and the Rotten Reverend Clinton email investigation. He withheld exculpatory evidence on Page. And he also met with Halper on August 11th, 2016, and then 4 days later, he wrote in an email that Page was likely an agent of Russia. He was responsible for compiling the Woods file, which contains many, many errors and omissions. And we learned from Huckleberry Horowitz that this person, he believes, is still employed at the FBI. He also was the primary interviewer of Flynn, along with Peter's been stroking us. He was, of course, part of the Flynn setup. And we know that he's been protected throughout the hearings when Goodlatte and Gowdy were trying to get him or documents, trying to get him as a witness or documents from him or emails from him. Couldn't get it. Everyone who's tried to get anything on this guy, they won't. The FBI, DOJ are totally protecting him. And the reason that they're totally protecting him is because he's currently the FBI's top witness in an ongoing case. That would be the Michael Flynn case. It's also the reason that Sidney Powell discovered and requested all the things that she discovered and requested, because of who he is and what he's all connected to. We know that he was with Peter's been stroking us on that August 5th trip to London, where they met with Alexander Down the Hatch Downer, and we know that he was officially titled as a supervisor on the Crossfire Hurricane team. Deeply involved in producing the info for the Carter Page FISA. He was in the email chain that received Kavalak's email. If you remember, Christopher Steele went to the State Department, met with Kathleen Kavalak. She then sent an email to several people. He was in this email chain, this case agent, special agent number 1 that we're referring to. He was one of the people who got that email from Kavalak, where she said, "Hey, and this Steele guy, some of the stuff he's telling me it's kind of crazy. It's not true." And of course, he then did something with that email. He doctored it, edited it, did something before he forwarded it on to his superiors so that they wouldn't get the full take of what Kavalak was trying to explain. He did not tell the FISA court about the many pieces of exculpatory evidence he had on Page. He was in charge of the Woods file. He gave Trump his August 17th briefing, which we now know was not a briefing at all, but was rather an opportunity to spy on Flynn, who was with Trump in that meeting. And of course, he is currently, as I said, the number 1 witness in the case against Flynn. The individual that we are talking about, and the person who almost 99% sure is the person that we are talking about, who's going to be probably the most heavily charged of all the people involved here, and he's currently still, according to Horowitz, still working at the FBI, is Joe Pientka. Joe, P-I-E-N-T-K-A. Joe Pientka. That is 99% sure who Horowitz is referring to all through the IG report when he discusses all these things I just went through. That is who he's referring to, 99.9% sure, Pientka. And the reason why they have to not put his name in there, and the reason why he's still being protected by the FBI and DOJ, is because he is the chief number 1 FBI witness against Michael Flynn in the Flynn case, which is still ongoing. So there you go. If you're reading stuff in the Horowitz report, you're reading excerpts from the Horowitz report, you're hearing people talk about this agent number 1, and it's driving you nuts. Who are they talking about? They're talking about Joe Pientka. Google him. Now, many of you remember back in 2016, 2017, 2018, been going on forever, how many times fake news media outlets said and brought guests on their shows and argued to the nth degree that the dossier was all good, that most of it had been proven to be true, that none of it had been proven to be untrue, that it was all intelligence community said it was good, everybody said it was good. Show after show after show, we had CNN, MSNBC, we had Clapper, we had Ted Lieu, Jim Sciutto, Mad Cow. Mad Cow did an entire show on why the dossier was all true. John Harwood, Allison Camerata got into a big argument with a Republican, I can't remember who it was, and she was, no, the dossier is true. It's all been proven true. I've spoken with people in the intelligence community, in the FBI. They've told me it's corroborated, it's true, it's all true. Now, after all this time, now that Horowitz has totally blown the dossier up, are any of these people, any of these fake news journalists going to come out and admit that for the last 2.5, 3 years, they've been telling us everything in the dossier was all true and everything else, and it had never been unproven, it was all corroborated? Are they now going to come out and admit they were lying or wrong? What do you think? What do you think? Don't hold your breath. Thanks for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow. See you. Bye.